Hypocrisy of democracy: how most of the world would see the US with Trump in the saddle again. A video book series by Chinedu Desmond Weke. Introduction. I recently came across Colombian President Gustavo Petro's response to the Trump administration's attempt to deport thousands of Colombians in military planes and handcuffs. Insisting on a dignified return of his citizens, President Petro drew a stark comparison between the Trump administration and some of the most notorious autocratic regimes in history. As he put it on X, and I quote, "We are the opposite of the Nazis," unquote. Does that name ring a bell to anyone in the room? With due respect to Reps. Scott Perry, the resemblance is so palpable. So, what's the point of all this? The recent mass crackdowns and deportations by the Trump administration expose a glaring truth, namely, the US is not the democracy it claims to be. Imagine the audacity of such a drastic measure without due legislative backing. Imagine thousands of residents being handcuffed and deported without authorization from any duly constituted court of law or legislative assembly. Yet, the US is often touted as a beacon of democracy and political liberty. Is this not a classic case of deception? Who is deceiving whom and how? We shall see. For now, let's examine the Trump raids as a prime example. The Trump administration is deporting illegal immigrants. But was this matter of immense economic importance duly debated on the congressional floor before being carried out by such an impetuous minority? It seems that one or two individuals are having the final say on what constitutes legality or illegality for each immigrant. Why were these huge numbers not considered illegal until one man took the White House? It can only be because there's a dearth of rule of law and an overabundance of individual rule. Against this backdrop, consider the far-reaching consequences of these raids and deportations on the US workforce, for example. Many are losing their jobs overnight, leaving thousands of US firms scrambling to find suitable replacements. Imagine the disjunctures. The cumulative impact on the US economy will be devastating, especially considering the country is still reeling from the effects of COVID-19. Even an elementary school economics class will enable you to know this. At this point, one is forced to recall the first Trump administration's extremely poor handling of the pandemic that was the sole reason it got so devastating on the country and the world. Why should one person continue to commit so much crime and continue to get away with it? Who can forget Trump's infamous statement about COVID-19 back then? And I quote, "I see the disinfectant that knocks it out in a minute," unquote. It's astonishing, downright astonishing, that such a statement came from the leader of the free world then. But what is even more astonishing is the fact that such a fellow got re-elected after 4 years only in a democracy. I honestly think that the US deserves better. In an article that will be shared at the description section of this video entry on YouTube, I will delve deeper into how the Trump administration's poor decisions and attitudes created the perfect storm for COVID-19 from as far back as 2018. In the meantime, let's be honest. Does a political system that re-elected such a leader whose excessively poor attitudes and leadership style resulted in such humongous economic damage as COVID-19 caused truly have internal democracy? It's beyond incredible that many Americans still view Trump as an economic genius, oblivious of the fact that what seemed to be his economic successes at the early stage of his first administration were largely built on the foundations laid by his predecessors. But that's a typical example of how profoundly the system is manipulated by undemocratic elements. Even the air is not free, and the average American mind too. Here we are again, with another Trump administration wreaking havoc, and there's no legislative body holding the executive accountable. Is this democracy in action, or autocracy masquerading as democracy? In this series, therefore, I feel inspired to bring honest, constructive, and sustained feedback to sane Americans. This is to enable them to see what we see from outside their shores. Great America is almost on its knees, but no one seems to see it happening. America has already fallen in the estimation of many. This is just a desperate attempt to stop the spiraling and the final Waterloo. If people show that they want me to continue this discussion, since I'm not one of those controlling the media with huge dollars, it's going to bring real positive changes to our common life. An important feature of the series is that I'm going to be proposing urgent political reforms to stop the ugly end from coming. We shall all have the opportunity to make inputs. It boils down to one thing: the current practice of democracy across the world needs urgent reforms, to which I also have urgent recommendations. Clue: it will end up getting everyone's input as the world gets ever more decentralized with the speedy dominance of the Web3 culture. Stay tuned for the next session. Please note, every image used in this media is generated from Meta AI. 2. If you find this content thought-provoking, consider sharing it with others. The status quo needs to change for good as soon as possible. 3. Check the description section for updates and access to future sessions. 4. Share your personal response at the comment section, and I will reply as and when needed. Thank you very much.